Paul Daley thing was crazy. What'd you see there? I mean, I found it really interesting in the post-fight press conference, and maybe this is what sent Dana White over the edge, that Daley actually told Dana he didn't hear the bell.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that sent him over the edge because Dana came storming across the ring. Paul Daley's corner was basically right in front of me, so I was just literally feet away. Now, that arena was really noisy, and you couldn't hear what Dana was saying, but I looked up and I said, Dana is not a happy camper right now, and he was letting Paul Daley have it. I don't think anything Paul Daley said at that point was going to save him. And here's the thing, I think, Steve, that's an issue here. Number one, had this not happened on the heels of the Strikeforce brawl, I think, maybe Dana acts differently. Who knows? Maybe he suspends him, maybe he fines him. I think that I know the commission's going to suspend and fine him. They did say that they're going to. Paul Daley is not done being disciplined. I don't know what the exact name of it is, but the Quebec regulatory body that oversees MMA is going to discipline Paul Daley. He's looking at a substantial fine and suspension. So even when he signs with another organization, he's not going to be in the UFC. He's not going to be able to fight right away. So that really cost him. And the other thing is some of these British fighters with this trash talk, they've got to knock it off. I don't mind trash talk if the feelings are sincere between the guys and it's not scripted stuff. But this was all scripted stuff with Paul Daley and Josh Koscheck, and they're trying to sell it. It was the same thing with Dan Hardy, and now you're going basically in between these two fights, 8 rounds where neither British guy accomplished anything. They got taken down. They just got drummed. I mean, it's ridiculous, and all this trash talking they're doing. I mean, I think. They're hurting the cause. And, the sport, you're trying to get it regulated in all these areas, and you're telling people, hey, they're class guys, they're different, they get it. And then somebody goes out and does that. And, I mean, including this ludicrous Photoshop contest that Daley held and that Hardy had done before against Marcus Davis. I mean, this stuff, is juvenile, and you got to get away from it.
Do you agree with the action taken?
I do.
Should it have been firing?
I do agree with it. My first reaction when it first happened, I mean, somebody hit me on Twitter and said, what do you think? And it was seconds after it happened, and I didn't really have a chance to think it through, and I said, fine. But as I was walking to the post-fight news conference, I said to myself, if I'm Dana White, what do I do in this situation? And I said, you cannot tolerate this kind of stuff. I mean, that could have led to a major, credit to Josh Koscheck and Big Dan Miragliotta, because if Big Dan didn't put a Kimura and a choke on Paul Daley, who knows what might have happened. But Big Dan did a good job of getting in the way and getting Daley calmed down and immobilizing him for a few minutes so that in fact, there wasn't a further and give Koscheck credit. You know what? As emotional as the fight was, and as amped up as I'm sure he was, it would have been easy to turn around and haul off and crack him, and he didn't do that. He walked away and got out of the way, and so Koscheck deserves credit. But those kind of things have the potential to really turn ugly very quickly, and so it was good that that Koscheck held his cool. And I do agree with the decision. I think that you're setting a tone. You're saying we put a standard on our fighters, and this is why I thought that Dana should have disciplined Nathan Diaz. You're saying, hey, we expect our fighters to conduct themselves professionally and into a higher standard. It's a privilege to fight for us. And if you tolerate that kind of behavior, then there's no meaning behind that. Dana White did the exact right thing. Paul Daley paid a heavy, heavy price for it.
So you mentioned the Strikeforce brawl and Nate Diaz. Do you think Dana kind of reflected on that a little bit, the way he handled it? Did that go into this decision, or was this just raw emotion and anger?
No, I think Dana knew what he was doing. I don't think it was a raw emotion thing. He was very angry, but I don't think it was a raw emotion thing. Here's where I think in Dana's mind, if I understand what he's saying correctly, where he's taking the Strikeforce thing, and then it's different than the UFC thing. The Strikeforce thing, as he said, it was out of the fighter's control. He's blaming CBS/Strikeforce for allowing the cage to lose control. So he's not blaming the specific fighters. I'm not saying I personally agree with that, but I think that's where his argument is. But in the UFC, he says, hey, we control the cage, and we're not going to put up with that. And there was nobody else in that cage that shouldn't have been authorized to be in there, so that the situation did not deteriorate. You didn't have a Nick Diaz or a Nate Diaz standing there when Paul Daley clocked him. Had Nick Diaz been right there, who knows what would have happened. So it was a fortunate, situation. But I think there's a differentiation between the two.
Okay. Are you surprised that nothing severe has happened to fighters in the past? Well, it happened with Babalu. Babalu did get cut for the extra choke, the extra time on the choke with David Heath, and then he said he did it on purpose. Husama Palhares didn't admit that he did it on purpose, but he has a history of holds like that. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they aren't the same thing. I was not particularly happy with the Babalu situation. I think, maybe in retrospect, I was even too harsh on him, though, for my comments. When things happen in the course of the fight and the emotion of a fight, I'm not condoning when you cross the line, but I think it's different than when the fight is over, the bell has rung, and you do something. Two completely different things. Husamar Palhares is saying, number one, you cannot prove conclusively that Husamar Palhares knew, or that the referee, that the guy was tapping or the referee was stopping the fight. At that point, I think he did. I think it was bad on his part, but we don't know. We can't conclusively prove that. We can't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, but we can prove that the fight was over when Paul Daley did what he did. And so that was a big difference. And I think that's where, Steve, you got to draw a line. Once that bell sounds and the fight's over, the fighters have to forget and they have to become professionals.
Last one. You mentioned Koscheck, and you gave him credit for not losing control. Does Josh play any role in this? You criticized Daley on the trash talk. Josh was there doing the trash talk before the fight. He was doing it during the fight. Does a referee need to tell him, hey, calm down? Did that lead to some of the action? Because Josh has quite a history now. I mean, I just put a piece up where, you think back, the first time we met Josh was during Tough One. He got Chris Lieben to break a door and put his arm through a window on a door. And now, he's got this deal where he's getting a guy to, sucker punch him. And then he's going off on the crowd a little bit, which I don't mind that much. But, it's all part of the mix.
Well, I think there's a couple things here. I mean, I think Koscheck acted very poorly on Tough, and I think he's disliked by the fans largely because of that. I think also he's disliked because of some of his early fights in the UFC where, they weren't that exciting and they were, take the guy down and hold him on the ground, the infamous lay and pray style of fighting. I think he's evolved from that, even though Saturday night's performance was not a dynamic performance by him, but he did what he had to do against a guy whose only skill was a big, heavy punch. Mm-hmm. But, no, I don't think, I think most of the trash talking was started on the Daley end and Koscheck responded to it. And, there's a theme here. Look, Michael Bisping did it, Dan Hardy did it, Paul Daley did it. I think there's a theme that, the British fighters are being promoted and they think that that's the way to, win fans and influence people. Now, in Koscheck's case, me as a Penguins fan, I loved it when he stood up and told the crowd that the Penguins were going to kick some butt. I loved it. But, I think Koscheck has basically taken the tack that, they hate me anyway, so I'm going to try to be the best villain I can be so people dislike me and we can sell as many pay-per-views. He knows that there are going to be a lot of people that are going to tune into Tough and watch because they like George St. Pierre and they want to see George St. Pierre just drill him. By that pay-per-view, it's going to make Josh Koscheck all that much bigger. So, he's just playing to that end of it.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's going to be 99.9 to 0.1 in terms of fan support on one side versus the other with GSP and Koscheck.
Yeah, I think if we eliminate family from the mix here, I think it might be 100-0. I don't think there's going to be too many people going for Cause.
All right, Kevin, good job.
Thank you, Steve.